start with Team Hard, obviously you was driving the event system, the CC.
Yeah.
Up to that, you've been in like spec series or single make series. So going into the touring cars, how is it different in general? Obviously, it's a lot more of a bigger operation. But secondly, the variables like saloons against hatchbacks at certain circuits, front wheel drive against rear wheel drive. What is that like? And when you go into it, you're sat there on the grid with first the other nutcases, let's be fair, by the first corner. What is that like for a new driver?
It was interesting for sure. Obviously, the difference in terms of its specification is that up to a certain point, there is an open plan to what you do. So you choose your chassis, your car. You can fabricate that however you like to fit the spec parts. As an example, from the bulkhead forward, it's pretty much the same, any touring car. That entire front engine placement, cage, everything, suspension assembly, the lot is all spec in a unit from RML at the moment. And same with the rear. I like to call it the rear box more than anything, because it literally looks like a cage, like a box cage underneath the rear of the car, where all the rear suspension assembly is bolted into. So there's a lot more open in the way of how you can design your car initially. But then once it's designed and it's put on the floor, you're kind of, that's where you are. Then you're on the same platform as everyone else in terms of what you can change mostly. But then you have different engine manufacturers. So you have Swindon, you have Neil Brown, Maltune. So you have different, and they're all competing against each other, and they're all, revealing some of their interests and techniques to each team. And so you have that side of things as well. So you learn to work with lots of groups of people. And you obviously have a tire guy who you have one. I think we had one member of Dunlop staff per team, or potentially per two cars. I can't remember. His name was Adrian, and I worked with him massively on developing our setup and making things work. Just paying attention to tire temperature spreads and all sorts of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff I'd done previously through various engineers in various racing series, but this was really wrapping it all into one. And you really do have a group of 15 to 20 people around you that you kind of go through to put this entire thing together. And given that, and I've said this before in another podcast, I'm not actually sure if it's above board, but my first laps in a British touring car were in free practice session 2 at Brands Indy of that race weekend. So yeah, my very literally there's a lot of guys that have come in 2020 and 2019 and say, oh, we've had very little experience of the car, but they've at least had a test day before their actual weekend. I had 0 laps, so I literally went out. FP1, the car was still being essentially fabricated and fully finished, ready for track, because it was the most last minute. In hindsight, it was way too last minute, but I grew from it, I suppose. I certainly learned how to adapt quickly. But yeah, that very first race and first qualifying session was, an eye-opener. And obviously I was way off the pace I would have liked to have been, because I was still just adapting to everything around me and learning to drive. Luckily, I had Jake Hill, who had done, a nice sort of bit of pre-season testing. He'd also already dipped into touring cars a year or two before with Motorbase. So I had some good data to refer myself off of. And by the end of that weekend, I was more or less on his pace. So it was, exciting. It's loud. It's like driving. How do I explain it? There's no soundproofing at all in a touring car. Every single bang and crunch and everything, it's like putting your ear in a tin and scrunching it up. You hear every single noise. You get a door bang to the side, and it's a bang. It's a proper noise inside the car, and it's crisp as well. It's really like all the pops and bangs from the exhaust, the whole lot. It is right there, and it's harsh, and it's I think I remember the day Jade Edwards first drove a touring car. I was at Snetterton, and she got a few laps, luckily, to drive. I think it was Jake's old car or my old car that was out as a 2-seater for a track day. And she came in and went, oh my God. And she'd been racing Clios, but she had never experienced that sort of level of noise and just general experience. It's like when you come off a roller coaster when you get out of the car, which is really exciting. And for me, with cars surrounding me, hounding me, you're getting, hit up the back, you're getting hit around the side, and you have to be on it. And I got eaten up a little bit initially, but you get your elbows out and you get used to it. You're not going to stand there and get punched in the face for too long before you start hitting back, are you?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, I was like to say, presumably the racing style was a lot different than the open wheel stuff, because if you touch an open wheel car, you just go that way. Whereas you're more protected in a touring car, so it's obviously a lot different style for you. When
you learn to lean on people.
A couple of seasons you've had, who would you say stood out as a driver, whether it be on or off the track?
Stood out as a driver, obviously. I mean, the common answer would be Sutton, but I would back that quite a lot, because he is an incredibly flamboyant and fast driver on track. It's simple as, and it's not like he only has one mode, but he just always wrings the neck out of the car. He's a lot more technical than people probably give him credit for outside of his bubble, because if you're ever near him on a track walk, you'll hear him talking about intricate diff settings and all sorts of stuff. So, he's well and truly on it. And as an all-round driver, I think he's great. I'd shout out to Jake Hill as well, because he's clearly starting to show himself now. Me and him certainly fought over the inter-team sort of battle between teammates, and whoever qualified highest and whoever got the best result in the team, because it was kind of our choice at the time. When you're struggling to get in the top 15 at some points, then you at least want to beat your teammate. So, and he always had the measure of me on a qualifying lap. Certainly had that 10th that I had to really push for sometimes. So those two guys, I wonder who's new. I've got to say Bushell, Mike as well, friend of mine really. He's another one who really deserves a spot there all day long, and it's just clear to see that money is what keeps you in that circus and nothing else really, because he's got a fantastic engineering brain. I've seen some of the stuff he's designed in the background, and obviously he can get in the seat and drive the pants off the car as well. So yeah, those three guys are very impressive. I think I'd imagine all three of them will see them at some point in the future, including Mike, do something pretty cool. So
yeah, so I certainly hope so, because when he got that run out last season, I think it was at Knock Hill, and he just got absolutely shafted basically all three races. I was gutted for him, because he isn't really, he didn't really get the opportunity. And like I say, it's a shame that money talks, because I think obviously got to put it nicely, but I think there are a few seats that are potentially wasted. I think that's probably the nicest way of putting it. But again, it's what it comes down to, unfortunately. So staying on the, if I was to say to you now, like, I've got an unlimited budget, go out there and pick me a car to race next season, you're in the first seat, picking A as a car and second as a teammate.
There's so many good cars now, but I'd probably say I'd go for a BM. I'd go for the Beamer, because I think that thing's, they've tried to slow that down, and it's still there. And also, I miss rear wheel drive a bit, so I'd love to actually do touring cars with a rear wheel drive car, and properly, qualifying lap really feels like a qualifying lap in a rear wheel drive car. You put the throttle down and the arse comes out. It's not none of this sort of sketchy front wheel drive business where it's kind of, it was really hard to get used to when I first drove a front wheel drive car, because it's just all backwards. It's all completely the opposite. And there are certain inputs that are just, hardwired from your brain to your foot. And you have to undo those and turn them back around when you switch from a front to a rear wheel drive car. So I'd have a BMW, and any driver in touring cars, or from anywhere.
We'll do both. We'll run a freight car too.
I think, God, he'd probably beat me though. Sutton. I don't know. It might be a boring answer to say him again, but I mean, I've never seen him drive the Beamer, and I imagine he would do some impressive things with WSR. So, yeah, I think it'd be a BMW 3 Series. We run that for a couple more years and team up with Ash, mainly because even if I don't get a result, he definitely would. Do you see what I mean? So certainly. And then across the whole world, that's really difficult to choose. I actually couldn't choose one. I'd have to choose. I'm trying to think of someone I raced that I would want to be teammates with, but every person you come up with, you're like, but what would they be like in this situation? So I don't know. I'm going to leave that one unanswered, actually, because I think there's easily 30 or 40 guys I know, some of which race and some who don't race anymore, that would be fantastic as a teammate.
That would get 30 or 40 PBLs off Alan Gow, to be fair. So probably a fair shout. So to bring it to 2017, so the second season that you had in, you did pretty well, to be fair. A little bit of rotten luck mid-season, a couple of DNFs and that. But considering the car perhaps wasn't the most competitive on the grid, again, I think that's probably fair to say.
Good in some circuits and not so good at others. Yeah.
But again, dragging some good results out of it, getting multiple points and whatnot. But at what point throughout the season, if at all, did you realise that perhaps you haven't got a drive for the following season? And what was that like, considering all the work you've put in?
I've always known, at the start of the season, that what about the next one? He's kind of, a lot of the guys obviously worked through the season, and so did I. Ideally, you'd have a 2 or 3 year plan so that you can have a year of not having to worry so much about it, which is what some guys do. But yeah, I mean, it's just stringing a thread every time. We weren't really sure if we were going to do 2017. I remember doing the last race in 2016 at Brown's GP, and it went terribly wrong. My bonnet flew up at about 130 mile an hour, smashed the windscreen, dented the roof, came in and had about half of the paddock's duct tape on the front of my car to get back out. I remember coming in sort of feeling quite emotional, because you sort of think that could have been the last time. That could have been it. It's over. It's all done. It's like the end of a holiday when you feel a bit, after like a 6-week holiday or something, and you get back on the plane going, oh, okay. Yeah, I would say the last couple of weekends in 2017 really hit home quite a lot. I'd made some good connections throughout the year through the different sponsors that had been involved with the team and myself. Yep. And there was some positivity to come from it. There was certainly some promising things, but we were well aware that we didn't have the bulk of what was needed to carry on. And if you haven't reserved that seat, someone will take it off you like that. Like literally, there are phone calls being made 24/7. It really is like, he's got it now. Oh, they're in the seat now. Oh, apparently he's talking to that person, and that team's talking to them. It is like full on.
Yeah.
And it was around Christmas time. I couldn't get hold of. I basically had a sponsor or potential sponsor that I was really, had my fingers crossed on doing something with, just go completely cold on me. So no answer for weeks. And it sort of reached a point around the new year of 2018 where Tony had said, I'm really sorry, we're kind of done. We're all sorted. And I knew that any other team was going to be even more budget to find. So it was kind of you're staring in the face of literally financial Mount Everest. Like, you just, how the hell am I going to raise that? And just for us at the time, it was very, very difficult to even stomach, getting close. We managed to raise some money, but it just wasn't going to do that.
Yeah.
And then, it went into the lower formula, the support categories of TOCA instead as a result, which is a whole other story. But yeah, it's tough. It's very emotional, and I can understand the feeling that other people have had at the end of the season, that kind of sense of just soft sort of emotions of, this is the end of something that's been quite special. Will it happen again? Will we manage to get back next year? So it's difficult.
So bringing back to the turn out to be your last week, so you said you've got a little bit of an idea that you might not be back next season. So I want to say you started the weekend, I think finished 18th, worked your way up to 10th, and then got above.
Drew the ticket.
You're at the front of the grid. So very last race of the season, and you have a little idea that it may be your last race as well. You sat there in first. You've got the whole gaggle of the gang behind you. What are you thinking going into that race?
So there was a lot of build-up around it because naturally, as the pole man for that race, your first pole, everyone's aware of it on TV. My phone was going mental. It was like, it was just like, oh my God, this is the moment kind of thing. It was really fitting, to be fair. I quite liked it because I was there thinking, well, could be the last one.
Yeah.
And Dad was sat there going, bloody hell, we're on pole for touring cars. And it might be a reverse grid pole, but it's one of those experiences. It's your opportunity. And I think it's unfair to talk about reverse grid poles in touring cars when there's such a difference between the most competitive and the least competitive team on the grid. And for me, it was. Can you still hear me? Because I just muted my laptop. My bad.
Yeah.
I need to just put my hands on my lap, don't I? Right. Yeah. There were more cameras. Everyone was in the garage prior to going out, and you have this sort of half-hour period of getting ready and checking everything and making sure you've made the right changes to the car, chatting to your engineers, going through the right installation processes, blah, 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 blah. You sat there in pit lane at least 20, 25 minutes before the actual race starts. So there's a lot of build up. But sat on the grid, to be honest, I just forced myself into this sort of mental place where I'm like, all I've got to do is hit my marks. I've got to get a nice pull away, a nice launch, good release of the clutch, spot the lights early, just the same as I've done from 12th, the same as I've done from 18th. It doesn't matter. It's just the same. I'm just further up the grid. That's the best way to look at it. There was an element of, bloody hell, this is serious. But in all honesty, I'm quite, and anyone that knows me well enough knows I tend not to overreact to situations like that. Like I could see a huge shunt or a massive anything, and I'll just be like, oh, well, that was interesting. And I've sort of learned to live a bit like that because I think, you can completely misread or overreact to something if you allow yourself to, and you can make something that's bad a lot worse straight away. So for me, I just kept calm, nice and chilled, bit of banter with the guys on the grid, same old sort of stuff, and just almost laughing about it. Really, I was like, this is mint, this is amazing. But also forget we were on slicks, I think, and it was raining, so it was like all of the extra bits thrown in as well. And we had a choice of new wets, into wets, I think. We definitely went for the wrong choice because it took me about 6 or 7 laps to get anywhere close to the pace of Rob Austin and the other boys. So it was a bit of a struggle and a bit of a wasted potential podium, I think. So unfortunately, wasn't the best ending race. We still came 5th, but yeah, we were struggling terribly on the first few laps. So yeah, really exciting. But in my side of things, yeah, I got a great start and I did everything as I wanted to. So I was quite happy, really. Sometimes you have to look back and say, well, that wasn't something I could have controlled completely.
Yeah.
I had a good go, and yeah, I think we went out, with a lot of pink and white Passat on the TV screen at the front of the grid, and I've got a lovely photo on my wall downstairs of me at the front of a 30 car touring car field full of names. So yeah, it's a nice moment for me, especially again, spending a quarter of what some of these guys were probably putting into their season budgets. So to be up there and do that well was decent, and we came 8th in the independent driver standings as well. So it shows, despite having drive shaft failures and a few other issues at points where I would have potentially got another top 5 as well at Snetterton and Silverstone. Yeah, I'm quite proud to come away with the results we did.